leadership starts with
Mm,
ourselves. For a lot of
mm,
us, the greatest challenge that we're ever going to face is in between the years. Um,
mm.
the most challenging person we will ever lead, undoubtedly, is ourself. So I would ask first, how are we leading ourselves before we start looking at leading other people or leading our situations? How are we leading ourselves? How are we leveling up spiritually, physically, emotionally, academically, financially? How are we sharpening our axe?
All right, welcome back, guys. In this episode, we have the bearded leader who has helped thousands of people achieve limitless leadership results. And like everybody I bring on the show, please reach out and connect should you have any question about leadership or want to improve in your leadership skills. So let's dive right into this. If I'm watching this, Josh, and let's say I'm a young guy, I'm a young gal, and I'm up and coming in my career, what are some key principles that could help me become a better leader?
Kevin, thanks for having me. Thanks for asking the question. The
Mm,
first thing I'm going to say is you are a leader. For a lot of us, we get this imposter syndrome where we don't feel like we're ready. We don't feel like we're prepared. We don't feel like this is the right time. But I'm here to say that the right time is right now. So know that you are a leader, and here is why. You have your own upbringing, your own life experiences that no one else has, which makes you one of one, which means that you have your own unique individual perspective. And when you have your own perspective that is not shared by anyone else in the entire world, you have the ability to be influential. And when we're influential,
mm.
that means we're contagious. We can either infect or we can affect. But of course, our listeners are going to be hearing this and saying, I'm a change agent. I'm going to influence people in a positive way. And so anyone who can affect change is a leader. So the first thing I want to share with everyone is you are a leader because you have perspective, which makes you influential and you can affect change.
Love that. And what you said right there really remind me really a quote, and that's been said many times is you are most qualified to help the person you used to be. And that's
Oh,
not
yes.
original. Yeah. So can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I feel like a lot of people in their mid 20s, early 30s, maybe they're struggling a little bit, but they don't feel like they have a lot of life experience. What they fail to realize, they're the perfect candidate to help that 18-year-old version of themselves.
Sure. Yeah, I'll expand on that. I will say this too.
Mm,
This is going to be a
mm,
little bit controversial to the quote that you just shared because
mm.
as a believer, I know that God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called, right?
Amen to that,
And
man.
and and, and
Amen to that.
because we're called, that means we're going to be going through some things and growing through some things. And so as we get older, as we get, I'll say wiser instead of older, I'll say as we get wiser in our years, there are things that we go through in life. And I think because we're going through things, it's a learning experience. And with a lot of folks, one reason why we're not taking action is because we're afraid of failure. At the root of a lot of challenges that we encounter, at the root is fear. And the thing about fear is that we know that fear is simply false evidence appearing real. And we're always going to find
Yeah.
evidence in the things that we believe, which means that if I believe that I can't do something or I shouldn't do something, um, maybe I believe that I'm not ready, I'm not competent, qualified, or capable. I'm going to find evidence that backs up that belief. But the problem is that's a limiting belief. And so what we learn is that one of the greatest mistakes many of us can make is actually believing all of our thoughts are true. And so when we recognize that our thoughts dictate feelings and our feelings dictate actions and our actions dictate results, we can then say, you know what, if I'm not achieving the results I want to achieve, let me go back and start challenging the thoughts that are creating them, right? So I'm going to
Yeah.
start challenging those thoughts and questioning those thoughts. I'm going to recognize that God has me in the seat that I'm in for a reason. And the size of my current seat doesn't dictate the significance of my impact. So we can all lead
100%.
right where we're at.
100%, man. I absolutely loved it, and resonate so much with what you said. And if you like, would you like to share your kind of personal journey, how your growth journey, how your God calling? Because I think it's such an inspirational journey, how you were in the corporate world for so long. And one day in our friendship, I met you. You told me, hey, God gave me this calling for me to start my own business, being a leadership coach, and then making impact the life of thousands. Now you spoke at Texas A&M, and then you just have some big arena under your belt now. But could I ask you to elaborate your story a little bit in your growth journey and how that impacted your
I'm,
leadership?
I'm happy to, Kevin. I appreciate you giving me
Uh,
the opportunity, man. I'll
uh,
say that for years, I did not view myself as a leader. And that's why the first thing I shared on this episode is you are a leader, and here's why. I'll go back to what I shared earlier: perspective, influence, and change. And for
Mhm.
many years, I just didn't believe that I was capable of being a leader. And my opinion back then was that a leader was someone with a formal title. And what we know with leadership
Mm.
is that leaders, it's not about the title. Leadership is a skill. It's a skill that needs to be practiced and developed. And so, about a decade ago, I was already at my corporate job. I just started at my corporate job. And the corporate job that you referenced was I was a corporate trainer and corporate coach, not really having a lot of coaching experience at the time, very little training experience at the time. But what I did have was the ability to connect with people. And in order to be a leader, we've got to influence, but we can't influence if we can't connect. And I believe that we can connect through authenticity, humility, and vulnerability. And so
Mm.
I started this corporate job about a little over a decade ago. And then just a few months later, they sent me to a leadership conference. And I remember the very first thought that I had was, why am I going to a leadership conference? Because I wasn't a leader. Like, that was the belief that I had. And remember, one of the greatest mistakes many of us can make is assuming all of our thoughts or beliefs are true. And so I went to this conference, and after the first one or two speakers, I remember having this shift in perspective. This is where the shift in perspective began to take place. And something I learned over the years is that with perspective, the way that we view things drives the way that we do things. So when I started getting a new perspective on things and how I viewed things, I started doing things significantly different as well. And I also was able to shift my perspective on just my own belief patterns. I started believing,
Mhm.
you know what, I am a leader because of the seat that I'm in. It doesn't mean that I have to have a specific title to be a leader.
Mhm.
I can lead in the seat that I'm in. I can lead where I'm at. I can water the grass where I'm at. For a lot of us, we think the grass might be greener on the other side, but I often share how the grass is green where you water it. And so, what are we doing as leaders, as peers, or even being led by people? How are we watering the grass for those around us? And so, I went through this conference, and pretty quickly, Kevin, that was really the turning point for me in terms of the belief I had in myself as a leader. Shortly thereafter, had the opportunity to formally lead the small department that I had started
Mhm.
in, and we were able to grow that department from 2 team members to 7 team members. And there were a total of 6 training programs by the time I left my corporate job just about a year and a half ago. And when I had started, there was just one training program. I was also hosting the leadership podcast that spanned across 31 states. The
Mhm.
brand itself is in 31 states and almost 300 locations nationwide. But before that, I do want to back up and share. Before that experience, about a decade ago, I'm a veteran, so I'm an Air Force veteran, and I was in the military for 4 years. And a lot of my shaping, if you will, kind of, I mean, I'll just say it. I kind of felt like I went from a boy to
Mhm.
a man to some degree because,
Mhm.
I moved from home. I went to a base that was far from home, didn't know
Mhm.
anybody, and learned a lot along the way. Had a lot of mistakes and failures along the way, but I've learned over the course of the year. Speaking of perspective, failure is not necessarily a negative thing, and a lot of us view failing as a negative, and some of us unfortunately allow those actions to become our identity. And what I mean by that is,
Mm.
when we fail at something, then we're a failure, or if we lose at something, we're a loser. And we all know that's not the case. There's a lot of
100%.
actions that are going to
That's
take
right.
place in our life, but those don't form our identity. Our identity is in Christ, and He says who we are, right? So I went through the Air Force and was able to gain a lot of incredible peers and mentors along the way, and
Mhm.
they helped me with kind of growing up and going through those failures and mistakes as well. Something I've learned is that if we're not failing, we're not learning.
Mhm.
If we're not learning, we're not growing. And if we're going to grow through anything, we've got to be willing to go through anything. And the reason I
That's right.
shared that with you is because now, fast forward over 20 years later, after entering, the military, over 20 years later, what I can say is that I've gotten comfortable being uncomfortable. I know that there's going to be times when I'm not. Where I don't know what I don't know, and it's a new challenge for me. And this is where a lot of us start to get that imposter syndrome that I alluded to.
Mm,
And even having a take on a perspective on imposter syndrome, the word syndrome is what is causing us all to think this is a negative thing. But the reality is, if we change that word to status, imposter status, or just imposter season, whatever, right? I mean, hey, we haven't
mhm.
been here before, so naturally we can think about um, how I can navigate through the situation, and we likely will start questioning, hey, can I do this? Am I ready for this? But we know when we have the ability and the know-how to challenge those thoughts, which dictate our feelings, which dictate our actions and dictate our results, those questions that we have are perfectly healthy. And we can then use that information that we gain to have a new perspective so that we can view things differently and do things differently, and we can get through anything.
Yeah. What you said right there, so many powerful takeaways. I love how you mentioned that we are God's most unique and greatest creation. And, to your point earlier, he doesn't call qualify, he qualifies a call.
Mhm.
And in your journey, and I think for the listeners out there, they can kind of see pieces of, okay, he was a veteran. He then had this leadership coaching, and he was able to kind of translate into what he's currently doing now, being leadership coach, being leadership speaker with your first book out and everything. But I'm wondering, there's a population of folks out there. I want you to speak to that population who work a day job, maybe as accountant, maybe as a process engineer somewhere in a corporate world, but they have a passion for art. They have a passion for music that's completely irrelevant from their day job. How are they maybe able to translate some of their leadership's experience from their day job, talk about that connection piece into their passion in art, music, or just something completely different?
Kevin, I love that question. Leadership starts with
Mm,
ourselves. For a lot of
mm,
us, the greatest challenge that we're ever going to face is in between the years. Um,
mm,
the, the 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 most challenging person we will ever lead, undoubtedly, is ourself. So I would ask first, how are we leading ourself before we start looking at leading other people or leading our situations? How are we leading ourself? How are we leveling up spiritually, physically, emotionally, academically, financially? How are we sharpening our axe? Because we have the opportunity to be the best versions of ourselves each and every day. But a lot of us
yeah.
are comparing ourselves to those around us who have been doing whatever it is that we strive to do. They've been doing it for
Mm,
years. And we
mm.
start comparing our day one to their day 10,000 and start thinking, man, why am I struggling? Why aren't I able to get through this? And we have to remember
Mhm.
that it takes time. We gotta, the Olympics just ended. So the Summer Olympics in Paris just ended.
Sure.
And one of my favorite quotes from a former Olympian, Usain Bolt, said that he trained 4 years to run 9 seconds. But some people
Wow.
quit after 2 months because they didn't
Yeah.
achieve their goals. And we have to
Mhm.
remember that practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes
Mhm.
progress. So we've got to
Mhm.
be consistent in the practice in order to make the progress. But in regards to the passion, whether it be art or music or underwater basket weaving, I'm throwing some things out here, Kevin.
Sure.
Whatever it is
Yeah.
we're passionate about, and that's not what our profession is in. My advice is just to go do it. Take action
Mm.
because what's preventing us from taking action and and finishing the painting that we're talking about or writing that book that we thought about or fulfilling any kind of idea that we've had before, it's again, I'm going to go back to it, it's likely fear. We don't feel like
Mm.
we're prepared. We don't feel like we're ready. Well, it's not perfect yet. I'm going to keep on waiting until the right time. And again, the right time is right now. Perfection is unattainable. Perfection is reserved for God. And so it's okay to do it scared. And when I say do it scared, it doesn't mean that we can't operate in faith. Do it scared, saying, you know what? I don't know what's next, but I'm going to do it anyway. Because
Mhm.
fear is what if. Faith is even if, right?
That's
And
right.
the
That's
similarity
right. Mm.
between faith and fear is that they both believe in a future that hasn't happened yet. So why not choose faith? If you're in a profession, but you have a passion for something outside of your profession, make time. make time to find what you're passionate about. What I've learned over the years is that your purpose is often derived from your passion. And so if you can find and make time for what you're passionate about, just go do it. Know that it's not going to be pretty. Know that it's never going to be perfect. But when you take action, motivation and confidence tend to follow.
Hey guys, I don't run any ads in this podcast because my mission is to make an impact in your life and help you move the needle towards your aspiration. It will mean a lot to me if you subscribe, share, or leave a comment. I would love to hear from you so we can spread the word and make a further impact together. All right, back to the conversation. Yeah, absolutely. And you either fail or you learn. And kind of to Josh's point, once you start pivoting, you start figuring this out. Even in my journey, as I kind of started on this YouTube channel, just also let you guys know, I was on Apple and Spotify way before this, but it took me a while to realize, okay, yeah, I'd love to connect with you guys more. Love to show you guys my face, show you guys my passion, and bring on a guest that you guys can connect with, and then just ask for questions so we can all grow, inspire one another, impact one another. Along that question, when you talked about just taking action, just get started, let's maybe dispel some of these future fears people might have so they can really just power through it. What are some general roadblocks, or what are some typical you see that in your leadership training when people do start taking steps into their dreams? What are some common trend failures? Is it a lack of time, lack of family support, maybe lack of extra financial resources? How do you dispel some of these challenges?
It's typically a lack of belief. It's a lack of
Mm,
belief in ourself and our abilities. We often overestimate what we can accomplish in a month, but we underestimate what we can accomplish in a year. And so what happens is we say, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm finally going to do it. I've been talking about it for a long time. I'm going to do it. And then we start doing it. And after a few days or a few weeks, we say, it's not really going like I thought it would, or I'm not as
sure.
successful in 3 weeks like I thought I would be. And so we find reasons to give up. We find reasons to quit. There's literally a day in the year, Kevin, called Quitter's Day. And Quitter's
Hmm.
Day typically it falls on the second Friday in January. And the reason it's called Quitter's Day is because statistically speaking, statistically speaking, over 50% of the people who have started New Year's resolutions just a short week or two ago will have already quit their New Year's resolutions. And so
Mm,
for a lot of us, we will again we'll find evidence in the things that we believe. So to more directly answer your question, it's important to note that humans have up to 60,000 thoughts per day. So I want to reemphasize that. We have up to 60,000 thoughts per day. And studies show that 80% of our thoughts are negative and 90% of our
right.
thoughts are repetitive. So it's no wonder why we regularly experience stress and worry and doubt and concern and anxiety and fear. But as I shared earlier, fear is simply false evidence appearing real. So what we have to do is challenge the thoughts that we're having, start shifting a
Mm,
paradigm. If I believe, if I start saying, you know what, the thoughts that I have is I'm never going to be able to achieve X, Y, or Z.
mm,
I don't believe that I can do this or do that. I could find evidence that backs that up, or I could say, you know what, I want to start journaling. I want to start writing down what are the reasons why I could achieve X, Y, or Z. Because I can easily point out why I can't do it. We can all do that. But what are the reasons
right.
why this could work? What are the reasons why I can not only achieve this, but even surpass my wildest imaginations? It starts with
Mm.
belief. Again, the biggest battle many of us will ever face simply lies in between the years.
I couldn't agree with that statement more. And to further elaborate on what you said, to your point, I think so many people are stuck painting a canvas, painting a picture of, well, if I fail, people will maybe make fun of me. I might
Mm.
take a reputation hit, take a damage. It's like, hey, don't want my pristine image of success or notoriety to get shamed on, whatever that looks like. But what people fail to do a lot of times, in my experiences, is they fail to paint that picture of what could happen, what could look like on the other side of that vision, with that picture perfect moment. We don't spend enough time painting that picture in our mind.
It's
And
so
knowing that what that picture looks like, then you begin asking yourself, man, that's worth fighting for. And to some people, that's even worth dying for.
mm,
Whatever that picture perfect moment looks like for them. So, and the only way to get there is like to Josh said, you got to start taking action. You start believing yourself, even if you take the micro step, because at the end of the day, the turtle wins the race. Um, Josh, in your experience for folks that you've done a lot of leadership coaching, what are some like typical breakthroughs you've seen in people that, this was a light bulb moment. Wow, this is something that really helped catapult this person to that next level. Any particular examples you like to share with the audience?
A great coach is going to ask the right questions, and they're going to know how to ask the right questions. They're going to be a good
Mhm.
listener. They're going to learn how to. They're going to model for their client what it looks like to listen empathetically. One of
Right.
my very first clients, and of course I'm a leadership coach, and so for a lot of the work that I do, it does directly focus on the professional side of things, people who are leading people in a formal sense. But I also help folks with life things and mindset things. And here's what I mean by this. When I first began working with Alex, he admittedly was a dictator style of leader. He said,
Mhm.
it's my way or the highway. This is just how I am. This is just who I am and how I lead people. And he had three direct reports that reported directly to him, and quickly let me know that he was the best at everything in his store. And so
Wow.
what I asked him to do is come to next week's call, prepared to share with me at least one thing that each of your three team members can do better than you. And he was unable to do it. He could not give me one thing for
Dang.
any of them. And we talked about this. We unpacked this. We got to the root of this situation. And that's why my coaching approach is called a roots to results coaching approach. And so we began to unpack this. We began to look internally. We began to recognize opportunities. And fast forward about 3 or 4 months later, and Alex had shifted from a dictator style of leader to a servant leader. And he could not stop telling me all the amazing things about his team members just about 3 or 4 months later. He could not stop talking about how incredible they were and the growth that they've made and the progress that they've made. All the while,
Mhm.
what he's implying, maybe even without realizing it, is the growth that he's made. And so we see a completely different side of Alex just a few months later, but that's not even the best part. The best part is, well, in fact, I two more things to share about this. So professionally, things were going really well for Alex. He took his store in a brand of about 300 different stores. He was around store number 20 in terms of total sales. And about 3 or 4 months later, he was able to bring his store to the number one store in that brand. And that number stood for about 3 months. And so he was the number one store in that brand for 3 months. That's
Mm.
not the best part. The best part is when he shared with me, he said, "Man, I got to tell you, this coaching has helped me tremendously from a professional standpoint, but this coaching has also helped rekindle my marriage with my spouse. My wife and I have never been better,
Mm.
and that was touching for me, Kevin, because what I do speak very heavily on is the importance of communication. We know that when there's a breakdown in
Yeah.
communication, voids tend to get created, negativity fills those voids. And we also know that at work, one of the biggest challenges that we have, in fact, this is the biggest challenge that I encounter with my clients, is communication or lack thereof. And we also know that that also applies at home. And so when we can
Everywhere.
improve communication on our end and our team's end, it can also trickle into the home life as well. And so Alex is not the only one who has shared feedback with me in terms of the improvements they've seen in relationships, in communication, in with their neighbors, with their family members, with their friends. And that really brings me a lot of joy, because when I got into coaching, I wasn't expecting to get feedback like that. My hope was that I could help folks at work and I can help them improve their numbers through the art of connection and communication.
Mhm.
What I wasn't expecting is the improvements in life in general and their mindsets. And so it's been incredible, and I just love what I do for that reason.
I love that. And I want to hone in on a piece where you mentioned on communication, because that for me is really like the what glues relationship together also can break relationship. And so
Yeah,
many times people just don't communicate. And go back to what you said earlier, if 60%, 90% of our 60,000 thoughts are negative, and if you don't communicate with someone, chances are you're assuming a 90% worse version of the reality, which is
That's right.
oftentimes that's not true. So could you elaborate what is effective communication and how often should we communicate? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question, Kevin. It's interesting that you talk about assumptions because I do have a session that I break down what I call the 5 steps to effective communication, and the first step is to actually assume positive intent, because
Mm,
it's very easy for us to assume the worst. Remember, if we have 60,000 thoughts per day, and studies show that 80% are negative and 90% are repetitive, we're naturally going to assume the worst or think the worst. So in this case, let's first and foremost assume positive intent. I mentioned that when there's a breakdown in communication, voids tend to get created and negativity fills those voids. So what we find is that there are often 4 different conversations happening for the one that's actually happening, which is the one that I'm
mm.
having, the one that you're having, the one that I think that we're having, and the one that you think that we're having. That's why the
Wow,
greatest
powerful.
misconception about communication is the fact that it's actually happening. So it is pivotal that we communicate effectively. And so I shared the first of the 5 steps, but we communicate effectively, and we also meet with our team regularly. And so one-on-ones is something that is I believe, a lost art with teams and organizations. One-on-ones are critical to your team's alignment, vision,
Mhm.
mission, and overall success.
Furthermore, on that, I feel like a lot of time, really, you mentioned Alex's personal life. I feel for so many people, I want to touch on personal leadership for a little bit. Here's why I've seen a lot in the people I encounter. They give themselves to their work, they give themselves to their leadership role, whatever it is. By the time they get home, it really feels like their personal leadership is their loved ones or the friends that are really important in their life. They get a leftover of that.
Yeah.
So how can we as both as a career business leader excel in that and also equally excel, if not surpass, in our relationship with our loved ones, super close ones, and also time with God?
It starts with boundaries. I mean,
Mm,
you're literally striking a chord with me when you talk about leftovers, because I'll share a short story that comes from
mm,
about 4 years ago when I was at my corporate job at the time. We had just wrapped up a training, and the training was about a week long, and I loved what I did. I mean, training for me is still a strong passion of mine. But after training, I remember driving home, just kind of decompressing, thinking, okay, this was a great week. I really enjoyed all the folks that I met, all the attendees in training, and I was the facilitator, or one of the main facilitators for training. And so when I got home, I was giving my wife kind of a recap of how the week went, and I was, it was all good things. It was stuff that I love, and I saw her facial expressions begin to change, and not in a great way. So I asked,
mm.
hey, what's wrong? And she
Wow.
said, Josh, I love you. I love that you love what you do, and I love that you love who you do it with,
Mm,
but sometimes it feels like we're getting your leftovers. And I'll tell you,
mm.
Kevin, that was the gut punch that I needed, because I didn't realize that what I was doing was I was going to work and I was giving my team 100, but I would get in the car after work and drive home and decompress, and I would stay decompressed. I would come home and I would probably go from 100 to about 70 or 80, and I truly was giving my family leftovers. And so, to go back to your question, it starts with boundaries. It starts with making sure that you're saying no to some things. What I tend to be guilty of is saying yes
Mm,
to everyone and everything, because I have a heart to serve. I want to help, but that doesn't mean that's a
mhm.
good thing. So what I learned was to say no to certain people and certain things, so that I could say yes to myself and my family. Because if I'm pouring from an empty cup, I have nothing left to give. I mean, I truly have
Yeah.
not even leftovers. I don't have anything left to give myself or my family. So what I want to make sure I'm doing is I'm giving to my family 100 all the time. And
Mm,
when I set boundaries, I'm not saying I give 100 to my family and 80 to someone else. When I set boundaries, when I time block, when I compartmentalize, when I learn how to be efficient through my calendar system, and learning how to set and keep those boundaries, I can give 100 to everyone, everyone necessary. I'll say that. I don't want to make it sound like people
mm.
are unnecessary, but if I have to say no to someone, I'm going to say no to someone. And so that's something that I've learned over the years, that I want to protect my peace. I want to protect my peace. I want to protect my family's peace. So I've learned how to set boundaries and keep boundaries.
Yeah. That resonates so deeply with me. Actually, you inspired me to create a new day splitting system. So in the evening, I mean, obviously, I got my daily deliverables just like you with my business and everything I run. And but at nighttime, really, the time from 6 to roughly around 9:30, I go to the gym, and I also spend it because if you guys don't know, I'm an extrovert, introvert. I love people, but I need my personal private time. I decompress. I only give it to the top 10 most important people in my life. So it's a business call that happens like 7, 8 p.m. I say, well, that can wait till tomorrow. It's
Yeah.
a people that wants to have a chat that's some sort of related that's on another capacity that's outside my top 10. That can wait at another time. So about prioritizing what really fills my cup to the people that really matters in my life. It's kind of like discipleship back in the old days. The 12 men that spend a lot of time with Jesus, so they
Yeah.
really poured into one another.
Sure. That's
Um,
good.
yeah. So, Josh, you recently had a book that launched called Leading a Legacy. And I see that's in your background screen right there. I had a chance to read it over. Amazing, quick read, just filled with so much action packed, tangible takeaways. And what's been your experience writing your first book? So, for folks that want to say that have that dream, you talk about personal leadership. Hey, I want to write a book too. What's your message to that person?
Do it. Everyone has a story.
Mm,
Everyone's story deserves to be shared. Something
mm,
I firmly believe in is that if we
mm.
knew everyone's story, we could not help but love them.
Yeah,
And I think it's
ain't that the
important
truth?
that you get your story out. And here's why too. When you get your story out, it's not really for you. It's for someone else who really needs it. Someone who needs to get that motivation, to get that inspiration. I talk a lot about how motivation is externally driven and inspiration is internally driven. But
Hmm.
recognizing that when you can get your story out and when you can serve someone else and make an impact on the life of someone else, you're able to inspire them at a whole nother level. And I
Yeah.
mentioned this in the book too. I believe that there are people in our life that are expecting us to actually fulfill God's calling for our own life. And I really believe that. I don't think that's by mistake. I think God puts people in our life who are depending on us to fulfill God's purpose for our own life. And so
Mm,
are we living today to make an impact for tomorrow? That's really what this book is all about, is what are we doing today to make an impact for tomorrow? Because at the end of our life, we're going to be leaving a legacy. And the legacy that we're leading today determines the legacy that we're leaving tomorrow. I'll go back and answer your question though, Kevin, because I haven't even answered it yet. For those who are thinking about writing a book, and you've had the thought for months, for years, just do it. This is my own testament to this concept of not feeling ready, not really knowing what to do next, but just doing it scared. Writing a book
mm,
was a challenge for me because it was my first time doing it. I mean, there were definitely days where I had that imposter, I'll say it status for us, imposter status. Ironically,
mhm.
chapter 4 of the book is a chapter devoted to imposter syndrome. And so,
Mhm.
um, you know,
Yeah.
I to me, it was something that was very fitting because, it's okay to have these thoughts sometimes when we haven't done something before. But writing a book was a great experience for me. It was one that is not going to be my last. I plan on writing many books down the road. I'm not
Mhm.
currently working on one right now, but I do expect to have more books later on. But it was a great experience, and if you're thinking about it, just do it. Go for it.
And allow me to brag on you a little bit because he won't say it, but I'll say it. That book actually opened him up to a door to a very lucrative speaking gig. Is a true story, right?
True story. Yeah, and I
See,
appreciate
you see
it.
him nodding. Yeah, you see him nodding. So you never know how the book is going to make an impact in someone's life. You never know how the connection, that's going to open up doors and opportunities for you. And then watching this beautiful dream unfold in so many unexpected ways.
The book
Josh,
is a
I
hook.
just want to recognize you. Since the time I've met you, I've had you on this podcast before, but your orator skills has really improved since then.
Thank you.
And you're laser focused, you're right on point, and the way that you're also able to relate to people, the way that you're able to speak to people who are starting off in their fledgling journey, I think there's just so much tangible takeaways that they're definitely going to be very appreciative of. And speaking on behalf of my audience, just want to really appreciate you and your time.
Kevin, hey man, I'm going to receive that, so thank you. But I'm going to throw it right
Mm,
back at you because I want to honor and highlight you, man. Since I've
thanks,
met
bud.
you,
Yeah,
you do the same thing, man. You say, you know what? I don't know what I don't know, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to get comfortable being
that's
uncomfortable.
right.
I'm going to try it out,
That's right.
man. I love how you believe so heavily in the importance of coaches and people
Yeah.
who have intellectual property, who have the knowledge that we don't have. You go and find it, and you go and pursue it and pay for coaching to improve. And I'm biased because I am a coach, but I share with
Mm,
all my clients. I have my own coach. I have my own counselor. I'm married to a licensed counselor, so I get free counseling even when I don't want it, which is all the time. But I want to honor and highlight you and say you are someone who not only talks the talk, you walk the walk. And
thank you, man.
a lot of folks who I've encountered over the years, and I used to be one of these people, was real good at talking about things. But when it came to taking
Mm,
action, I would always find a reason to say, I'm not ready. I'm not going to do it. But man, you talk it and you walk it, and I commend you for that because
thank
that's not
you.
an easy thing to do.
Thank you. Well, we're all one relationship away from changing our life. We truly are,
Mm,
guys. So you
yeah,
guys listening,
good.
that's been really a recognition for me in the last 6 months is we're just one relationship away from changing, one connection away. So definitely get after it. Uh, and what I'll do is I'll put Josh's contact information in the description, also where you can pick up a copy of his book in there as well. So you guys will be able to see all of that in the description. And Josh, I look forward very much to our next conversation, brother. God bless you and your family, and I can't wait to see you on the Summit Greatness that's coming up, man.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate you, man.
All right, sounds good.